Is there anybody out there? Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Oh, thank goodness. I thought I'm speaking to just empty people. Anyway, thank you for coming out. It's a Sunday afternoon, and you take the time to invest, to listen to our special speaker that we have today. And this is our support group meeting that we have it every fourth Sunday of each month. Put that in your mind, every fourth Sunday of the month. And it's always at 2 to 3:30 p.m. We used to have a cooking demo because of the, the Omicron or is going on. A lot of people are afraid that they don't want to come and join the food demo. So we're going to hold it for a couple more weeks until everything is open. All right? So welcome to join us. Now, we are not only the support group in our church, we do have another support group that meets once a month, every second Sunday. And the host and co-host is Betty and Vernita. They also invite speakers to come and join them, and they do it through Zoom. It's not in person, all right? And then they not only do have a once a month meeting, educational meeting, they do have a support group that meets every first and third Thursday. Those groups are very active. If you join them, what they do is they share their experience, they share their challenges, and that's where we learn from each other. You know, sometimes when we go on this journey, we struggle. Once in a while, I do struggles myself, but by listening to that testimony, it gave us a lot of encouragement. So I invite you to join them. And both meetings are through Zoom, and the numbers are there, and the password is there, okay? And if you need any more information, I saw Betty is here, and you can talk to her. Oh, right there, Betty is right there. Okay. Now, next month, we have our special guest that we have during the health seminar. Yeah. If you don't know him, he's just sitting next to you. So it's going to be on March 27. So please come and join us. All right? And then last but not least, we have our guest speaker today. Our guest speaker, I get to know her through Betty and Benita's Zoom meeting, and get to know Nan, and I bought a book, I started reading, and the book is awesome. Aging Powerfully. And what she's going to do after, when she finishes her presentation, she will have a book to stand up for sale and for autograph. So feel free to meet outside. Okay? Now, before I introduce her, you see all these nice flowers? This is a cocktail grapefruit. Am I right? It's donated by Philip and Ida Kung. So on your way out, there's a whole box of them. Feel free to take one. This is mine, so don't touch this one. And so, enjoy yourself. All right, let me introduce our speaker. Nan is a certified integrative nutrition, health, and lifestyle coach, author of this book, Aging Powerfully, and with a certification in plant-based nutrition from Cornell University, a culinary instructor focused on plant-based nutrition. She's also an associate member of the College of Lifestyle Medicine. Nan specializes on her work with Dr. Wayne Dysinger. Many of you know who's Dr. Wayne Dysinger because she's one of our doctors panel during the panel discussion. A founding members of the College of Lifestyle Medicine, evidence show that 80% of chronic illnesses in America is lifestyle related. I'm one good example. I love to eat I always tell people I love to eat that move slower than me. They are gone. I'm just like a vacuum cleaner. They're gone. And by eating the American Western diet, that's got me into trouble. So, chronic illnesses in American lifestyle related. Now, Nan has shared with us She's 71 years old young, and your birthday is in January 9. Dr. Hansdale's birthday is January 25th, and mine is 26. Look at that. And three of us are all 70 and above. So what's the secret? Whole food, plant-based. Read Daniel chapter 1. To teach lifestyle modality that can lead to a vibrant health and wellness at all ages. Nan's greatest wish to see the baby boomer, we are all baby boomers, generation rise up in a movement to fight the devastation that the current health crisis is having on our population. Nan and her husband, Tim, they live close by. They live in Riverside, California, and with their little white cat named Grace. During her time with us this afternoon, Nan will briefly explain the pillars of health as outlined by the College of Lifestyle Medicine, with a focus and recommendation on the pillar of movement and nourishment. We all heard of New Start program, right? New Start, the first two letters, N and E, nutrition and exercise. She will also have a book which is also sold on Amazon and elsewhere available, and will offer a book signing after presentation. Thank you, Nan, for coming, and the time is all yours.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate your interest, and I will tell you a little bit about my journey with my book. When I was 69 and a half, so that was, well, almost 2 years ago, I looked at turning 70, and I thought, okay, when I'm 70, what am I going to do? How am I going to feel? Is that the beginning of the end? And then I realized, wait a minute, 70 can be the beginning of another 2 or 3 decades. A lot of people see anything, 50s, 60s, 70s especially, as the beginning of that downward kind of spiral that you see a lot among Americans, among people who live with the Western style of eating and living, as sort of the beginning of procedures and pills and combinations of illnesses that give them a lot to talk about at a party. But I decided that no, I wanted decades, and I wanted decades of good health. And how was I going to make that happen? I was going to make it happen by deciding, first of all, that I had a reason to make it happen. So purpose, for me, became the incentive for writing this book. I decided that because before I began with my journey as a whole food, plant-based health coach, I had been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. The antibodies were sky high. I was sent to a cardiologist because my cholesterol was 230. I was pre-diabetic, coming in at about 118, 119 every time I did my fasting blood sugar. And every one of those numbers led me to a specialist, and that specialist led me to a prescription pad. And I knew that was the beginning of the black hole. I knew that if I took all of those pills, I'd need pills to mitigate what happened with those pills. And I said no to everyone. I said to a cardiologist, you know what? I'll change things with diet. Diet has next to nothing to do with cardiovascular disease. He said, I would put you on statins. As a matter of fact, I think everyone should be on statins. I was shocked. I was actually appalled. So I went whole food plant-based, took none of those pills, not the immunologist's recommendation for immunotherapy, none of that. And that was, it's going on 4 years now. Oh, they also wanted to take my gallbladder out. They said it was sludgy. And I didn't want anything to be removed. I've got a perfect gallbladder, I'll tell you that. And I have better health than I've ever had because if you read, or if you do read Aging Powerfully, there's a bit of memoir in there, because for almost 55 years I struggled with an eating disorder. Not proud of it, should have ended it a long time ago, but just couldn't seem to manage. And so my life was in so many ways great, but in so many ways it was shrouded by this eating disorder, this obsession, this fear of food that I couldn't get past. And you know when that ended? That ended when I went whole food, plant-based, and started balancing my metabolic system. I can't think of anything else. It was that and another book that I read called Brain Over Binge, where she taught us that we could understand that urges just came from the lower level of our brain, that reptilian brain telling us to eat everything we could because we might starve, and usually that starts with early years of bad dieting and over dieting, etc. Anyway, didn't mean to get into all of that, but I will say that whole food plant-based can change things that people would never expect it to. So I wrote this book, part memoir, and the rest of it was it's an acronym, Powerfully, for 10 lifestyle modalities that will lead to health and longevity. The first 5 are from the College of Lifestyle Medicine. The other 5 were from evidence-based stories and books that I read of things that we can do to strengthen our emotional, our mental, our physical, and our spiritual life. And with that, let's talk about lifestyle medicine. The pillars of lifestyle medicine, based on what I talk about at Lifestyle Medical, Dr. Deisinger's clinic, has been condensed to 4, and that is nutrition, which is anything that goes into our body, and exercise, or we call it movement, any movement we make, as well as community, which means those that we embrace in our lives and people who care about us, as well as resilience. And we call it resilience, and that's really stress relief as well as sleep. Those pillars, community and resilience, we could do everything perfectly, but if we don't pay attention to and prioritize sleep and prioritize the mitigation of stress, either by mitigating it with things like yoga, meditation, mindfulness, or mitigate it by lifestyle changes that help us live in a less pressured way, or doing both, that could interfere with everything else that we do, right? Because it, for one thing, affects our adrenal system, and our body doesn't work well at all if our adrenals aren't working, because we're so stressed we're shutting things down. The same with resilience and sleep. Well, the same with sleep, and that is that if we're not prioritizing that 7 to 9 hours a night on a regular basis, and some people pridefully don't prioritize it. They see it as a badge of courage that they do overnighters, and they have no idea what a mistake that can make to us long term, including with the potential of, if we do things like that on a regular basis, affecting our brain to such a degree that it can interfere with our the power that good foods give us to help prevent Alzheimer's. So that's something else that we need to think about. But today I'm going to focus, Terrence had asked me to focus on nutrition as well as movement. And I'm going to begin with nutrition. With the right food, the kind of food that feeds us at a cellular level, we can find vibrant health, balance, and joy, those things that seem elusive as it relates to anything that would have to do with nutrition, but it affects us in a way that it even affects our neurotransmitters. In other words, the serotonin, the the dopamine, the adrenals in such a way that we can live without the kinds of medications that a lot of people are prescribed on a regular basis because they can't stay, I'll say, balanced emotionally and mentally. And those descriptives, vibrant health, balance, and joy, seem, again, elusive, but they're not and can be affected by the way we eat. She's a sunflower, strong and bold, true to herself, not as lovely as a rose, but also not as fragile. Why did I read that, and why did I bring sunflowers? Because to me, that's a bit of a metaphor for this next subject that I'm going to talk about. And it's part of our body that a lot of people don't even realize we have. Some people are now calling it an organ. And that part of our body that I see as one of the most important parts of us is our microbiome. And that's where I get motivated and inspired by everything that I eat that I know will feed the microbiome. That has become my, I'll call it, focal point. So what is the microbiome? It is what some people will say 10 trillion cells, maybe, or microbes. Some people say 7. Everybody says we have more microbes in our microbiome than we have cells in our body. So in essence, we're the vehicle for that. Some people call it an organ, 3 to 5 pounds of microbes. And they are bacteria, protozoa, yeasts, fungus, preferably the beneficial kind, something called archaea that was discovered that is an ancient form of anaerobic material. The point of the microbiome, and it is on all of our skin, including the majority of it in our gut, is fed by one thing. And I'll tell you what that is in a minute, but let's cover what the microbiome, the function of it is. It defends us against pathogenic organs or organisms if it itself is healthy. And we can keep it that way, and we'll talk about that. It regulates the immune system, degrades toxic compounds, cleans them out, digests food that we cannot, and then facilitates the absorption of minerals, synthesizes essential vitamins, vitamin K, folic acid, amino acids, which are building blocks of protein, and produces beneficial products called short-chain fatty acids that regulate inflammation. What happens if our microbiome is not healthy? I won't go through all of that, but each of those symbols and each of those descriptives is an important part of the functioning of our body that is associated if we aren't eating the foods that feed the microbiome that then affects the short-chain fatty acids that then affect those systems. Each of those systems are degraded if we're not feeding the microbiome and if our microbiome is dysregulated. So what feeds the microbiome? That word, fiber. What has fiber? One thing, plants. Fiber feeds the microbiome, and from the American Gut Project, the 10 or more years of work that was then brought to out with reports on their results just a couple of years ago. Actually, it was, a couple of years ago. The beginning, I believe, of last year. No, the year before, sorry. In any case, what was found to be true was that the healthiest people on the planet were those with the most diverse microbiome, and the diversity of the microbiome is affected by the foods we eat. The greater the diversity of foods, the greater the range of colors, the differences in the kinds of fibers or fibers that food possesses, the more healthy our microbiome. The more healthy our microbiome, the healthier we are, and the longer we're going to live disease-free. The benefits of whole food plant-based then begin with the diversity of our microbiome. It increases the growth of what? Short-chain fatty acids that are metabolites that affect our lungs, our heart, our vascular system, and the production of the hormones throughout our body. It suppresses the growth of Salmonella and Clostridium. The polyphenols increase the bifidobacteria and lactobacillus, which are two of the most prevalent bacteria in a very healthy gut. They've been identified as such. It's anti-pathogenic and inflammatory, the anti-inflammatory effects. Mono, polyunsaturated fats are positively affecting the bacteria, the firmicute ratio, and improve the short-chain fatty acids. And the plant protein reduces pathogenic bacteria and increases, again, the short-chain fatty acids. Well, what are we doing in America? The U.S. food consumption by percentage of calories shows that only 12% of the food we eat in America comes from fiber or from plant foods. And what this little note says here is that about half of that is from foods that may be plant foods but aren't whole plant foods. Things like apples from apple pie, tomatoes from ketchup, potatoes from French fries. In other words, the American diet may have plants, but they're plants that are degraded by cooking and processing and the manipulation of those foods that take it so far away from as grown that our body doesn't recognize them as whole foods and therefore isn't benefited by them in that way. Processed foods make up 63% of what we eat in America, and the problem with that is most of those foods are not identifiable by our gut microbiome, by those bacteria in our gut, because they are affected in ways, in other words, the food is stripped of everything that matters, the fiber, the protein, the enzymes that are in the food, and the parts that can be shelf stable are used. So they can call it a corn muffin, they can call it an apple fritter, but it's almost devoid of those foods because they're filled with stabilizers, emulsifiers, all kinds of chemicals. When I got that vision in my mind of what a processed food was, it was very easy to comfortably simply turn away things like that, because I could imagine that I was putting something in my body that actually was going to change in a negative way my microbiome, which meant that the healthy foods wouldn't have the bacteria in there to break them down properly and release the short-chain fatty acids and the nutrients, because I didn't have in my gut what I needed to eat healthy every time I ate, I'll call it garbage. And that's one of the things that I try to tell people when they say, oh, well, it doesn't matter if I go on vacation and spend a week eating off the buffet line of the cruise ship, the processed foods, the things that are made so tasty that it's very hard not to eat them. It matters to our gut because it takes a long time to bring it back again. And it means that during that time, the really healthy foods we could have chosen are going to be harder to digest in the future. Animal products are 25% of what we eat calorically. So in other words, processed foods, animal foods, and very little, about half of that 12%, are what the standard American diet, the SAD diet, is going to nourish our body with. The Guide to Healthy Eating is very simple and not affected by the what we call industry. And that's why so much of this message is never out there, because industry and industry influence is so strong and the money is so great and the influence is so readily available on all media that it's just not out there, that the best way that we could eat on an ongoing basis for health, for longevity, for just feeling great as we age, rather than just taking for granted that going downhill is just part of what is expected, is to eat less meat and to eat more vegetables. Yes, sir?
So what you're saying is eat more foods that don't have nutrition labels. Is that right?
I think I'm saying eat less foods that don't have nutrition labels. And I'm saying, and I'll quote you, eat food as close to grown as possible. Eat foods that haven't been messed with. And the more of those foods we eat, the better they taste. That's the hard part for a lot of people. They don't understand that if they keep eating fritters, apples won't taste like anything to them. If they start eating apples, fritters will be way too sweet and almost obnoxious. Thank you. All right. Animal versus plant protein. This is a hot subject. All right. When you look at the difference, you realize that eating animal or plant protein has to be the only thing that makes sense. But let's break them down. Animal protein is pro-inflammatory. We increase in inflammation, cholesterol. Our antioxidants are not built by eating plant protein. There are no phytonutrients, because phyto means plants. No fiber, dysbiosis, and endotoxins are increased. HCAs are wait a minute. Shoot. Dr. Deal, HCAs. HCAs. I just drew a blank. Anyway, it's what's caused when when animal products are, why am I drawing a blank on it? Oh, this is embarrassing. Anyway, it's caused when we cook the hydrocyclic amines. Yes, hydrocyclic amines. And it's caused when meat proteins are cooked at high temperatures, and that's from barbecuing, grilling, or from frying. And that's how most meats are cooked. In other words, it's a carcinogenic result of the cooking of meat proteins. Doesn't happen with plants. TMAO, trimethylamine D or L oxide, is something that happens when we eat meat proteins. It's a metabolite that when it goes through the liver becomes TMAO, and that is inflammatory and also causes aging and is part of the process that leads to a lot of our chronic illness. IGF-1, insulin-like growth factor, has been shown to cause growth at our cellular level, which is fine when we're young, but when we're older, that's the kind of growth in cells that can lead to cancer growth. Insulin resistance, AGAs, bioaccumulation of pesticides, herbicides, dioxins, heavy metals, antibiotics, hormones, and eating animal products are acidic. When something is acidic and it affects our body and starts to lean our body toward acid, you know what happens? Our bones start releasing calcium, to modify that. And when people say, but you've got to have meat to keep your bones strong, it has been shown epidemiologically that the countries that eat the most meat tend to have, as in America, the most brittle bones, because we're using the calcium out of our bones to mitigate the acidity of our meat-heavy diet. In the countries that drink the least amount of milk and that have the less amount of animal protein, those are the countries that have the strongest bones. So we don't want the acid from our foods. Plant proteins, exactly the opposite in all ways. The inflammation is down, no cholesterol, antioxidants, phytonutrients, fiber, microbiome diversity, no CHAs, trimethylamines, insulin-like growth factor, plant iron as opposed to heme iron, which is toxic to our body. Plant iron can be digested easily. Insulin resistance down, AGEs down, easy to wash, and get rid of the dioxins, no hormones, etc. When you look at that and you realize that when you make a choice, and I'm not saying whole food, plant-based exclusive if that's not something that you're comfortable with. I'm whole food, plant-based exclusive because I see the value of it and it resonates with me. And if I love the food I eat, and I'll show you that in a minute, then it's easy for me to make these decisions. But if it is a make or break decision, some people think, well, I either add a lot of plants and stop eating meat, or I'll just keep eating what I'm eating. If I could simply get people to just add plants, as many as you can. What am I talking about? Greens, vegetables, tubers, legumes, grains, seeds, and nuts. If I can encourage people to increase those in their diet and eat less meat, less fish. And fish used to be a somewhat more healthy food than I believe it is now. The problem is that our oceans are not only becoming depleted, but our oceans are also full of plastics and mercury and dioxins. They are, well, it's like eating out of a dirty lake. I wouldn't do it, and I don't feel comfortable encouraging other people to do it. So I say just stick with the plants if that's something that you can do, and if not, at least go plant heavy. One of the things that I found is that it's very, very easy to keep weight down on a whole food plant-based diet that is on the lower end of the, I'll call it fat scale. In other words, if I keep my fats, well, oils, I avoid oils. Why? Because I get plenty of fat from avocados, seeds, and nuts. But if we look at a caloric density weight loss key, there's so much that we can eat here above the line. Vegetables of all kinds, fruits of all kinds, tubers, squashes, corns, oats, grains, rice, pasta, beans, and legumes. Basically, and that's per pound, 600 calories, 500, 4, 3, 2, 1. If we're eating foods that are 1, 3, 5, 600 calories per pound, and most people eat about 3 to 5 pounds of food a day, and we're averaging between the highest and the lowest, probably 200, 300, 400 calories per pound. You can eat, feel so satisfied, stay so healthy, and stay lean, eating as much as you want to eat. That's what I find. That's my husband and I find. On the other hand, if we go below the line, now seeds and nuts, I eat plenty of that. Tahini, I eat plenty of that. But the majority of my foods are above that line. When you're eating avocado, same thing. That is a more caloric dense food. That's eaten in smaller portions, at least in our house, seeds and nuts. smaller portions, but the foods above the line are eaten in what we call ad libitum, as much as we want, as often as we want. And let me show you what those foods look like. And before I do, this is Joel Fuhrman's list of the top superfoods based on caloric, on nutrients per calorie density. And if you notice, there's nothing but plants here. And these are the most nourishing plants on the planet, the most nourishing foods on the planet per calorie. And it starts with kale. Isn't that interesting? All right. This chart is beautiful, and I won't read it all, but the point here is the diversity of foods based on colors. I brought something with me. You already heard about this beautiful grapefruit. I also brought this with me. This is a cauliflower, and it's purple through and through. It's absolutely delicious. Last week we went to the farm store that we have in Riverside called the Corona Family Farms, and they had this, and I was going to steam it. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, but I broke off a piece and I ate it. It's sweeter than regular cauliflower, a little less sulfurous, and it was so good that throughout the week I just chopped it up and put it on salads, and it looked absolutely gorgeous. And the anthocyanins that make blueberries such a popular superfood are in anything that's purple, like purple cabbage, that's a superfood. The purple sweet potatoes that we eat all week long, that's a superfood. And now this gorgeous cauliflower. So the important point here is that every one of these colors have a different nutritional profile and affect us in a different way. The reds and oranges and yellow oranges and green whites and white greens and blues and purples and browns. Even things like onions have a nutritional profile that we're not going to get like inulin, and inulin's a kind of fiber like asparagus has inulin, Jerusalem artichoke has inulin. It's a fiber matrix, I'll call it, that affects our gut bugs in a way that other foods don't. And so when we look at foods, and we look at foods as a rainbow, oh, this is funny. God, this is so personal, but I'll say it anyway. We love our water pick. And so after lunch, if I don't drink anything and I water pick after lunch, it looks like confetti. And my point is that there is so much color in my lunch salad every day that it's just from water picking, there's just this plethora of color. And I think to myself, well done, Nan. And I'll show you, I'll show you the salad that I'm referring to in a minute. But just take this in and understand that every food you eat in a different color. This is cauliflower. This will give me something different than white cauliflower, or different than orange cauliflower. A red pepper, a green pepper, an orange pepper, a yellow bell pepper, they all will give you that vitamin C that peppers have, but they all have additional nutrients as well. That's what it looks like when I come home from the Corona Family Farm, especially on a windy day, if you notice the hair. Okay, this morning, and we do this every Sunday, we go to a place called, and let me say something before I even tell you that. If you're traveling, if you're out anywhere, if you have decided, if I'm going to eat, I'm going to get as close to whole food plant-based as I can, because I really like what I've heard about the Happy Cow, but the app Happy Cow is very helpful. Through Happy Cow, I was seeing my financial planner one day. It was 1 o'clock, I was hungry. I went to Happy Cow. That's how I found Oasis. Oasis is part of the La Sierra Whole Food Market by La Sierra University in Riverside. And it's a vegetarian restaurant that has wonderful vegan options, purely vegan, very low oil on anything, and fabulous food. Well, this is our lunch. This is how much we eat. And actually, there would have been one more order of potatoes. The potatoes are roasted. This dark right there is grilled mushrooms, but they grill it on a grill without oil, so even those are really, really lean. And the tacos are tofu tacos with a turmeric aioli, and the aioli is made with silken tofu and roasted vegetables. Anyway, it is the most delicious combinations of foods. That's lunch, and then we go to the farm store. Some people say, but I'll miss my comfort foods that I'm used to, my pot roasts. That's a pot roast, but it's a portobello pot roast. This is a carrot meatloaf. You miss a meatloaf? This is delicious. Carrots and oats and other grains. And I have recipes for this at nansimonson.com on my website. This is a paella, seafood-less paella. This is fermented black beans and garlic and shiitake mushrooms. Dried shiitake mushrooms are reconstituted, and green beans. It's one of my favorite dishes. I can throw in tofu for some protein. This is a Thai coconut spicy stir fry with tofu and a combination of vegetables. Comfort food, spaghetti. This is a jarred sauce that didn't have sugar, didn't have oil, but I added to it spinach, chickpeas, and some lentils, just leftovers from the refrigerator. And this is just a big, chunky stew of vegetables. To keep things easy, this is frozen broccoli, a pound of broccoli out of the freezer, dump it in a pan, throw on some nutritional yeast, some garlic powder, and a little bit of turmeric, and roasted in an air fryer or a very hot oven, and they were delicious. This is a bowl, a Buddha bowl that I throw together for lunch, or for my husband, he likes an open-faced avocado and red onion sandwich with crudités salad as well as smashed roasted potatoes. That's how much we eat, and that's dinner sometimes. Matching salads and the squashed potatoes, but there's the red potatoes as well as the white potatoes. So, sweets, of course we have sweets. That's a whole grain corn muffin. That's cookie out of currants and oats and banana. This is nice cream, cherries and banana mashed up after frozen. And this is a pumpkin and pecan pie. No sugar, no oil, no egg, whole food, 100% plant-based, a little bit of dates. And that's my husband and I in England when we were staying there for the birth of, well, his oldest daughter's baby. And if you are determined to find food, you can travel all over and still stay 100% whole food, plant-based. People are fed by the food industry, which pays no attention to health, and are treated by the health industry, which pays no attention to food. I think we've made our point, haven't we? And it's true, and I'm not being sarcastic, but it's true. The role of exercise. We hear the recommendations, 150 minutes a week of moderate exercise, defined as exercise you can do with someone and still be able to talk. Strength training. Exercise improves cardiovascular health, helps reduce the risk of obesity, lowers the risk of diabetes, improves insulin resistance, mental health, reduces risk of depression, improves sleep, reduces risk of certain cancers, colon, breast, uterine, and lungs. So I ask you, if we're not talking about exercise, but we're talking about movement, what movement do you love? I discovered something a year ago. I saw an ad by our Mission Inn letting us know that the runs were back. The Mission Inn Foundation runs, 5K, 10K, and half marathon. And I decided, oh, I'll sign up for a run. I'd never run in my life, not even down the block. And I signed up for a 10K, and that was 5 months before the run. So I went to couch to marathon, or couch to 10K, and they told me what to do. There's actually an app for that, and just start running. I've fallen in love with running. So when I say, what do you love to do? Sometimes what you love to do is something you haven't even discovered yet. My first run was at the Mission Inn last October. I was number 2 in my division. Then I ran at the Citrus Heritage Park in January. I was number 2 in my division. I've become a runner at 71 years old. Go figure. Never thought that would happen, and I love it. What do you love to do? I'm adding to those previous recommendations the flexibility training. That is something that we lose as we get older, and that is the ability to move in certain ways, to kneel down easily, to get up easily, to stretch sideways without hurting ourselves, to lift something off a shelf and have the strength in our arms to do that. And the flexibility training, strength training, and cardiovascular training may look like a lot of expectations on the part of your time. On the other hand, if we just pay attention to the need of all 3 of those ways of movement and integrate them in other things that we do that aren't even called exercise, like gardening or oh, this is interesting. I love this. This woman, Ernestine Shepherd, is 80 years old. This is Ernestine Shepherd at 80 years old. Now, she's more buff than I would want to be. I'm not going to work out in the gym to that degree. But what do a lot of 80-year-olds look like if they don't move, if they don't take care of themselves? A lot of them are on walkers. That's the difference. If we do enough of the right thing, we can go on beyond where we are now in ways that we never imagined we could. So, like my running, I don't know if you recognize this pretty lady there. That's Elena. She is part of the Seventh-day Adventist groups in Loma Linda. That was my first run. That was the Mission Inn run. And I had a bad knee then. I was seeing a physical therapist who said, I wouldn't run if I were you. And I ran anyway. And he said, well, then I'll see you after the run. And he had a little work to do. But I was able to run the next run in spite of that. This is Mount Rubidoux in Riverside. If we were in Colorado, they'd call that a knoll. Here we call it a mountain. That's something that I do 4 times a week. That's something I've loved, fallen in love with doing. So when I say, what would you love to do? Why? Because it's beautiful up there, because it's green up there, because I see lizards and birds and an occasional coyote. These people bring to light another subject as it relates to exercise, and that is that the more you do of a thing on a regular basis, the more of a tribe that you will identify. I know all of these people now. Why? Because for years I've been going up that mountain, and they know me and I know them. And this pretty lady right there, that's Jane. She is 89 years old. Jane is up that mountain every single day. Because she's done it, she can. That's me riding around Fairmont Park. If I'm not on the mountain, I'm on my bike, both for an hour every morning. And then after dinner, my husband and I take a half an hour walk because it helps regulate blood sugar and it helps jiggle the bowels. And it's a good way to catch up the day. Gardening, Tai Chi, yoga, dancing, play music that makes you move and then move like a maniac, golf, or just making a bunch of sand fly. And you all know her, don't you? Marge Jetton. She passed away in February of 2011 at 106 years old. She was in the Loma Linda and Seventh-day Adventist community, and she got a lot of attention for her longevity and the way she lived, her determination to walk a mile every morning, to do her cardiovascular exercise, to get on her bike and ride her stationary bike. And then purpose. Did I skip? Yes. Ikigai, the Japanese word for purpose. What is the Chinese word for purpose? Is it ji? I don't know. But Ikigai is part of what is highlighted in the blue zones in terms of purpose, or plan de vida in Spanish, the use of your day. Be it from our belief that we are all part of a community and owe it to those around us to make a difference, or like this woman, 104 years old, and her goal is to be alive to see the grandchildren's, the generations of grandchildren. This woman who simply wakes up every day happy as a lark and wants to continue to keep people happy around her. And I would say it's up to us. It's up to us. And in the past, cigarettes to no smoking. Now, we're still eating this way. Most Americans are. Is this going to be our future? Movement, food, community, resilience, getting enough sleep? It's up to us. So, as I said, I wrote this book because I had a history of dysregulation as it related to food and as it related to health. Even though I stayed healthy, I had a secret that nobody knew about, that I was ashamed of. And when I was able to walk away from that and credit a balancing nutritional plan, whole food, plant-based, and a mission that is to show other people how we can age with power, live with power, be healthier than we thought we could as we get older and look forward to our 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond. It inspired me to help other people realize that that can be part of their life as well. The sunflowers became part of my personal representation of life. And I'll read this to you as we end. I don't think there's anything on this planet that more triumphs life than sunflowers. For me, that's because the reason behind its name, not because it looks like the sun, but because it follows the sun. During the course of the day, the head tracks the journey of the sun across the sky, a satellite dish for sunshine. Wherever light is, no matter how weak, these flowers will find it. That's such an admirable thing, such a lesson in life. When we look at possibilities ahead of us and some things look hard, I think of the sunflower. Hard doesn't matter. Hard makes us stronger. Hard shows who we are. Hard makes others feel inspiration by what we choose to do. So I have books here. You're welcome to buy a book. If you have a book already that you've read of mine, I have a present for those who buy the book or who already have the book. And it's a package of sunflowers that look like this and look like that, because I bought a package of sunflowers, a big package, and then repackaged them with 5. It was from the East Coast, and they're sunflowers that grow well here, but there are 5 different sunflowers, little teeny ones and some of the really big ones, and that's my gift to you. today with your book, if you own it or if you buy it today. And I'm wondering if you have any questions. Any thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
I do have a question, and first of all, thank you so much. I do sometimes still struggle with cravings. I don't know if my body's lacking something. Is that something that you can speak to help us when we have a craving and we're trying to eat whole food, plant-based?
Yeah. And I don't know if this is applicable to you, but I find that I have cravings if I've eaten foods that are, I'll call it too rich. In other words, if I have chips, a bunch of chips somewhere, like we go to Chipotle, and I'll get their beans and no meat, just beans and the sofritas and things like that. And most of the time I bring my own baked chips with me, but sometimes I don't remember. And I'll get their chips and I'll have some of their chips with the bowl, the salad bowl that we have. And it sets up a bit of a craving. So one of the things I've simply learned is it doesn't pay to trigger that. The other thing is that if you're not getting enough, at least for me, I don't know if it's your case, if I don't get enough starch, I eat probably 70 to 80% of my, well, maybe 70, 75% of my diet is starch-based. It's sweet potatoes and grains and lots of beans every day. If I eat adequately and I eat those foods that satisfy me, that fill me up with fiber, that balance my metabolism, I'm not hungry and I'm not anxious about food. If I let myself get hungry, if I have a big salad and there's nothing there that really stabilizes that salad, there's not beans, there's no grains, there's not some maybe tahini or nuts in my dressing, a little bit, then I might get what I'll call hungry or craving because I just feel empty. I don't know if that speaks to you, but that's my experience. Anybody else? Yes.
So recently, I've been vegan now for about 6 months, ever since the class started, the last class of Dr. Deal. So no meat, I stay away from oil, I do not add any sugar or salt. It's always hidden in some things, and you never know what you get if you eat out, so I don't eat out a lot. But recently, I hadn't had Brussels sprouts in a while, so I had some Brussels sprouts, and I do not know what combination of the food, but I had a stomach ache, a lot of gas, and I was like, oh my God, I feel awful. And I hadn't had that in a real long time. So I'm wondering, what foods should you not have together that could cause bloating and that kind of thing? I mean, I'm ready to give up Brussels sprouts, but it was on your list.
All right. Brussels sprouts.
I don't know if the Brussels sprouts was it or not.
Yeah. Do you eat cruciferous vegetables? Do you eat cabbage and broccoli? Okay, all right. Sometimes it's a combination. Sometimes it's the harder to digest beans, like red beans. Kidney beans are the hardest bean to digest. If you have some very hard to digest food and then you throw on top of it some hard to digest vegetables like cauliflower, cabbage, the cruciferous vegetables that are more sulfurous and cause more gas just because they do, the combination just may have been too much, or it may have been quantity based. Maybe you had a lot and you just couldn't get through all of that fiber. I don't know. Do you have a thought, Dr. Deal?
Well, we have found that many people
I'm going to give you this.
develop these kind of symptoms that you talked about. But it's usually in that the adjustment from a low fiber diet to a high fiber diet has been too abrupt. So if you have the usual American diet, which is very low in fiber, 10 grams, Then you go to a whole plant-based diet. You then usually get about 40, 50 grams, per day. And it's that sudden increase in fiber that creates this turbulence in your digestive system. And also it develops some antisocial behaviors. But it's only temporary.
Another question? Yes, of course.
All right. So I really love the Ezekiel breads, and I get them. But I just wanted to try a different one, So I went over to Loma Linda Market about 2 weeks ago, and they had this bread there. And I'm a label reader now, religiously. So I got this new bread, seeds and grains, but it had whey protein in it. Talk to me about, is that dairy? What is whey protein?
No, whey is dairy. Whey is dairy.
Well, maybe they shouldn't carry that there.
Yeah, and if you stop eating, if you go plant exclusive, you have fewer and fewer bacteria in your gut that know what to do with meat and dairy. And that's a good thing, actually. But did it cause a problem? Oh, you had that with your, well, possibly. And what Dr. Deal explained is absolutely so. And I should have said that because sometimes people will get very enthusiastic and go from here to here, very little fiber to a lot, and you just don't have the enzymes, and sometimes your body's just not ready for that. Your microbiome isn't ready because it doesn't have the bacteria. You can, and it works this way, you can have teaspoons or tablespoons of something, and it'll encourage of plant food. It'll encourage the growth of certain bacteria in your gut that can then take more and more and more of that food. So introducing small amounts of things, of any given food that you think you're sensitive to, can allow you to have more and more of it later on. Any other questions? Yes.
Thanks, Nan. That was a good presentation, and I learned a lot. I have 2 children, and both of them are on the lower index of the BMI. So they are on high-calorie diet. So we feed them a lot of bacon and avocados and things like that. They both hate tofu, so that's not a choice for us. So what else do you recommend that is more vegetarian? Our doctor advised us to give them a lot of ice creams and deep fried food. This is exactly what doctor told me. He said, give them a bowl of ice cream after dinner every day to add more calories.
Okay, I'm going to be so inappropriate here. Most doctors have no idea how to feed our bodies. And unfortunately, the industry funds most of the information they get. The dairy industry, the meat industry, the processed food industry that knows how to make us addicts to their processed foods. I mean, the processed food industry was bought by the tobacco industry because they knew their lessons, and they just took those same lessons and put them into the processed food, the processed foods, and they hooked us on them. So a lot of doctors don't know. Just like the cardiologist that told me cardiovascular disease has nothing to do or very little to do with the food we eat. That just made me want to scream. In any case, I even hate to do this, but bacon, for one thing, is a carcinogen. It's a class 1 carcinogen. Processed meats are class 1 carcinogens, not just because of the salt and the fat, but also because of what I'll call the acrylamides, all the stuff that is created by the way that processed foods are treated. Ice cream is full of sugar and fat. Dr. Deal, what would you tell her? Because I'm not a doctor and I'm not a dietitian. I would say, and I'm very familiar with many people who raised babies as vegans. The mother went through pregnancy as a vegan, raised her children as a vegan, successfully, healthy, beautifully growing children. But to change from and to have a pediatrician that's saying one thing and then to change to what I would do now, which would be a vegan lifestyle for those children, I can't even begin to tell you how to do that. So Dr. Deal, do you want to address that?
Well, this is a very painful observation, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
That our medical colleagues are usually not endowed with knowledge about nutrition in the medical school years. That's a fact. And I think in this case, I would recommend to you to fire the physician and then go make an appointment with Dr. Deisinger. Dr. Deisinger is a different kind of a physician who has been very much involved in the whole movement and development of a lifestyle medicine profession. So having said this, when it comes to the consideration and worry that you have that your children are not perhaps having the right weight for the age, you can add foods that are somewhat a little bit more higher in the caloric index, such as beans. Beans and lentils would be excellent. You can also add some avocado. Avocado is one of the richest foods in fiber that's out there. It's also a little bit high in calories, which would be really great for your children. What you want to be a little bit careful about is don't give the kids a huge salad, because that's nutritionally excellent, but calorically it's not enough. So you want to give them perhaps some of the, you mentioned potatoes.
Potatoes, nut butters. Nuts. You want to be careful, maybe with peanut, but the nut butters.
Yeah,
Calorically.
that would be fine too, yeah. Nutella, no. Nutella, no. But some nuts would be excellent. Nuts and avocados and beans, and you have different kinds of potatoes. You mentioned purple potatoes.
Oh, those are amazing.
Tell me about this. Where do you find those?
Oh, okay. There, you can even get them online. There's a brand. Well, I get it at Clark's. You always have a Clark's here. It's Frida's, F-R-E-I-D-A, apostrophe S, Stokes, S-T-O-K-E-S, purple sweet potatoes. They have them at Clark's. There's labels on them. You can find them on Amazon and buy a case. They're not just purple outside like a Japanese sweet potato, which is white fleshed, but they are purple through and through. For a snack, when I said about eating adequately and the carbohydrates, if I'm hungry or I'm a little like antsy or my blood sugar is going low, I'll take a thick slice of a piece of sweet potato, whether it's Japanese. I'm not crazy about the red ones, but the Japanese or preferably the Frida Stokes, and I'll put a little nut butter on it or a little hummus on it, and I'll eat it with a cup of tea. To me, it's like eating cookie dough. You know, it's just delicious, and it's filling, and it stabilizes your blood sugar right away. And potatoes are tubers are a great way to fill up. Soy milk, for those of you that worry about protein and you're thinking of it with your children, soy milk is the same amount of protein per cup as cow's milk, but without all the estrogens and the hormones and all those things that the dairy milk has. So you've got a way of adding protein to their meal as well. That can, if they get used to drinking the soy milk, and you've got the protein and some fiber in there as well. You just want to make sure you're getting brands that are not heavily processed, like the Trader Joe's soy beverage is soy and water. I think it's Westbrook or Westlake, Westway or something is also just soy and water, as opposed to those lecithins that our gut bacteria don't like. That's an emulsifier, and a lot of those gums our gut doesn't like. Anything else about the...
Well, if you want to lose weight, have lots of soups, right? If you want to gain weight, make them into a stew. So you add a lot of beans and potatoes and squash and so on into it, make it more sort of like a thick stew. And that would give some extra calories, and with that, you always get some extra protein.
Okay. Anything else?
Any more questions?
We have a question back there. To a degree. She asked if cooking kills phytonutrients. To a degree. On the other hand, there are things, let's use onion for an example. Some people don't think onion is something that isn't even a nutritious food. The allium family, onions, leeks, shallots, green onions, chives. Onions are very healthy, and there's something in onions that is healthy raw, but there's also something that's released, the alliinase in onions, when you cook it a little bit. The same thing with tomatoes. Tomatoes have a lycopene that is healthy, that's released when it's cooked. As a matter of fact, they have found that for men and prostate health, cooked tomatoes is very beneficial, like a tomato sauce, more so even than a raw tomato. So to answer your question, yes, cooking can degrade, for example, vitamin C, but by the same token, it helps some things become better assimilated. I just happen to be someone who cooks food as well as raw, whereas there are some people that are raw vegans, for example, and would just say we're not getting enough nourishment that way, and I just don't quite disagree with, I don't agree with that. I like the effect of grains and legumes on our body, and they need to be cooked. Anything else? Yes, ma'am. Oh, yeah. Well, if you have an Instapot, for example, you don't have to soak beans. You could cook them from the raw state. It just takes longer. To make them more easily digestible, I always soak my beans. I cook them with a piece of kombu, and I like the flavor of that, and it makes them a little bit more digestible. So soak them and then cook them either in an Instapot or on the stove for long hours. But you really don't have to if you don't have the time. And you can eat beans out of a can, but even the ones that are in cans that are PBA free, the PBA is replaced by something else to protect the food from the can, and we don't even know what that does. I still eat plenty of canned beans, but I really have become such a connoisseur, and I'm in love with beans. That I buy them from Rancho Gordo, where they have a lot of the heirlooms, and I do all of those from raw. Somebody else had a question? Yes. Oh, kombu is a sea vegetable. It's like a kelp, but it's not kelp. It's a seaweed, sea vegetable, and it's sold in little strips. And I put it into my beans, and it gets soft, and then I toss it. Sometimes I'll take a couple bites out of it because I really like the flavor. It's like a seaweed, but it's supposed to make it a little more digestible as well. Anything else? Yes, sir. Is it true that if you don't soak your beans, there's actually toxins in the legumes? Well, the worst toxins in legumes are those that are affected that we will get if we soak a bean even, but that we don't cook it. It's not a fallacy that kidney beans eaten raw could literally kill you. Yes. So, oh yeah. So you don't mess around with cooking beans. Beans, in most cases, need to be cooked, especially those red beans. Soaking, you don't really have to soak them, but you get some of the starch out. change them somewhat when you soak them. I always soak them. Some people don't, though. The person who owns Rancho Gordo, the bean company that does these wonderful heirloom beans, he many times will, and he says this in terms of what he does with his own food, he will cook his beans raw, just put them on the stove and cook them for hours. I always soak mine a few, like 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. But no, I don't think they'll poison you whether or not, that is not based on the soaking, it's based on the degree of rawness. Yeah, you want to be real careful with that. But bean sprouts are different because most bean sprouts are seed sprouts. Some of the beans, if they're sprouted, have changed enough molecularly, like mung bean sprouts, that people will eat them that way and they're fine, but not all beans. Okay, anybody else? Yes, ma'am?
Do you eat just eggs?
I never eat eggs.
No, just eggs in the carton.
It's not a whole food. Yeah, I really stay a lot with, and I'm not going to say I'm a purist, because yeah, it's you know what, even there's something that we say to people, if you are transitioning from standard American diet to whole food plant-based, do whatever it takes to do it, like Impossible Burgers and the burgers, like, yeah, or Beyond, yeah, Impossible Burgers, yeah, Beyond Burgers, all of those. I don't do any of those anymore. I say that, and yet I eat tofu, but tofu is minimally processed. But no, I don't. I'll make an egg-type thing using tofu, my scrambles all the time, and I use a little bit of the, what is it? The turmeric to make it yellow, but the black salt. I think it's I can't remember what it's called, but there's something called black salt that's slightly sulfurous tasting, and that gives it the flavor of eggs. If you Google black salt, it comes up with a word that I think is an Indian word, actually, and it really makes the tofu taste like egg. But usually I just eat tofu that way. But no. Anything else? Okay, I'm going to sit in the back if anybody would like a book, and I have a card that you can take regardless. And I want to thank you for your attention. I want to thank you for being here. I appreciate you. And take real good care of yourselves. Age and live with power, and you'll be happy you did. Thank you all.
Well, thank you, Nancy Emerson, for your recommendation and for your advice. And I hope that everybody, got all the information that you need. And it's very true that, when you choose your doctor, choose a doctor that believes in whole food, plant-based diet. What has happened last Monday? Because I changed my doctor, I changed my insurance policy, so I have to call a new doctor, and so we do a virtual consultation. I have to tell him my story about my background. I have a heart attack, I have a stent put in. Then you know what he's trying to do for me? He prescribed Lipitor, he prescribed blood thinner. I said, Doc, no, I don't. I have changed my lifestyle. I'm a whole food plant-based person. He said, but you have a statin drug. You must take Lipitor. I said, Doc, I'm not taking. So after, when everything is done, he wrote on my chart, patient decline. Yeah. Well, it's to cover himself too, you see. He has told me about it, so if I decline, he has to put it down. So friends, if you find a doctor that, to me, sometimes don't make sense to me. I'm not a doctor, whole food plant-based diet, nutrition doctor, and he makes a lot of sense to you. Okay? So now for me, some people can switch cold turkey from a meat eating to a whole food. So when I had my heart attack, 3 days in the hospital. On the third day when I left the hospital, I told my wife, starting today, I'm going to be a vegetarian. And I have been a vegetarian for 5.5 years. I've never gone back to it. So how do I tell myself what I need to eat, what I can eat, and what I cannot eat? This is what I can tell you. Eat as much as G-bombs. How many of you know G-bombs? Dr. Joe Furman. G-bomb. G-B-O-M-B-S. G stands for green. B stands for all the beans. O, onions, garlics. M, mushroom. B, all the berries. And then the last, seeds. As if you can eat as much as those, you're okay. Then I learned from Dr. Cowell Assistin what you must not eat. And he says, anything that has a mother and a face, don't eat. No oil. I've been cooking for 5.5 years, no oil. It can be done. So when I go out to look for something to eat, these are the two things at the back of my mind. That's it. Very simple. Thank you again very much and for spending your time with us. So you want to go to the back, we can get your book ready. And thank you all for coming. And don't forget, next month we have Dr. Hans still going to speak to us. Okay, so we'll see you.